All right, great. Let's go ahead and get underway then. Today is January 11th, 2024. This is the first meeting of the year for us in the Technical Advisory Council of the Confidential Computing Consortium. If you are joining us for the first time, we're here to collaborate in an open setting to help protect data in use. Everybody is welcome to contribute here and to any of our projects, SIGs, and other work products. If you're not sure how to do that, we've got contributing files in our repositories and code of conduct in all of our repositories, but you can also just ask any of us friendly people that you see in the call here as well. Since we're an open community, we also abide by antitrust policies, and you can read more about that on linuxfoundation.org/antitrust-policy. And with that, here's a look at the agenda. I've restructured this a little bit from how we've done it to break it into old business, our tech talk, and new business. And just see how we're doing on participants here, because we've got a few people that we're expecting to give content today. I'm not sure they're all quite on yet, but we will we'll keep moving forward with things and see when they join. So old business, the tech talk, and some new topics for today. And then time permitting, we like to try to schedule out what we're going to talk about in the next session or so. And we don't have a ton of those mapped out yet for the year. So if people have topics that they want to bring, now's a great time to do it. Were there any other agenda topics that people expected to see today?
There's one kind of, it's not quite it's not quite a first time attendees. It's a Sal intro as TCA topic, but hopefully that can fit in the first bit, if that's okay.
Yes, we can definitely do that. Why don't we do that in between? Why don't we do that before official roll call? In fact, we want to hit that off. Would you like to introduce Sal, or?
I think Sal can introduce themselves, can't you, Sal?
I can.
Sal's so shy. I didn't think that that they'd be able to do that.
That is not a word we associate with Sal. Not what I associate with Sal.
Quiet, but not shy. Yes, so hello, I am Sal. Many of you have met me before. I've been on these calls in the past, trying to soak in what was going on before I got started, and now I'm here. So as the TCA, generally that's technical community architecture. So what I'm doing right now is reaching out to all the projects, making sure I understand what they want to contribute over the next year, how they're going to do feature development, and see how we can enrich that and make sure that the community knows what we're building. And I'm here for anything else you need, so let me know.
Wonderful. It is great to have you here, Sal. I've seen your note to OE SDK, for example, and there's a great plan mapped out in there, exactly what Sal's going to be helping OE and all the projects with. So it's definitely a gap that we've had in our community and something I'm excited to have filled.
A quick question for you. So the consortium has sort of two types of building blocks. There are projects, right? Like Grameen just graduated, and then we added whatever SSCM. And then also we have SIGs. Are you dealing with projects or also SIGs?
Projects and SIGs, right? So the SIGs that support them. I'm also engaging in outreach as well. So the way that it's going to look really for me is a lot of times I go out and give high level talks. I'm going out and getting as much exposure for CCC as possible. But for me, I'm really going to make sure that those are embedded and connected to the tech and to the demos that we can give out, right? So it's got to make sure that it ties back. So yeah.
How is that different from what the outreach SIG does?
So the outreach SIG is sort of marketing and education. This is very much focused on communicating and developing the technical content that can support that, making sure that those connections are made. And it's about architecting the community when there are connections within the stack that make sense, making sure that those are put out there. But it's definitely a role that can and should evolve. It's existed for about 2 weeks. So let's figure out how this works best. Whatever gaps there are, let's figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
And way to be able to answer questions on the fly. So we'll definitely be figuring out Sal's role as experiences inform us. And first and foremost is getting somebody focused on the projects, and that's what they've jumped into right away. But you can't do that to the exclusion of the other facets of the CCC. And outreach is a good example of that's sort of like the main amplification for our projects goes through that committee.
So one thing we talked about yesterday, for instance, on the GRC SIG is there's a number of GRC related bits and pieces. Let's say things that have come up via GRC interactions, which need to have broader visibility. And one of the things that Sal can do is give those things broader visibility to other SIGs, committees, and projects. So that fits in very nicely, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The long and short of it is, if there is something that you think I'm missing so far, I probably am. Let me know, and I can be onboarded within the first 2 weeks. We're good.
Wonderful. All right, so let's get into formal roll call for the voting members, and then we'll welcome new contributors to the community. So if you haven't introduced yourself a couple times before, start thinking about how you want to introduce yourself in a few words with your name, your pronouns, where you came from, and or where you're coming from, and what your interest in confidential computing is. Meanwhile, let's see how we're doing with attendance today. Do we have Nathaniel on? So I do not see an ARM rep on, and I know that Eric, I do not expect to see Eric today. Fear or Catalan? Google today, okay. Howard. Okay, so Howard is often unable to make it because of the time zone. I'm here. Do we have Microsoft? Seem to have lost Microsoft. And Red Hat. I don't see Lily or Yash, which is surprising. Rian or Ben, do you think you could try to reach out to people in the back channel in case they are lost on a different Zoom link?
Yeah, we'll do.
Thank you. All right, so we don't have a lot to vote on today, so not too much of a worry without the voting members, but let's get into people who haven't had a chance to introduce themselves to the community at least twice. Again, let us know where you're coming from and your interest in confidential computing. And then part of the benefit of this organization is we can connect people with like-minded interests. So feel free to just pop off of mute.
I can go. I've only introduced myself once. So this is Ijlal from Canonical. I'm the product lead for confidential computing. I've been in the space of trusted execution environments for the past 10 years. Started in research with SGX in the academic labs of Intel when the hardware was not even there. So it's very exciting to now be working on actually deploying this in the real world. So our interest in Canonical Ubuntu is basically it's adoption. We work heavily and closely with the cloud partners and with the silicon to enable on one hand. We also have our own efforts ongoing for enablement on the private cloud with our own stack with XT and whatnot. And we're in the consortium just because it's the place to be, it seems. Just we want to also contribute to the attestation. It's one piece that we hear a lot of questions from our customers about to make confidential computing meaningful to them and to get them really the guarantees that they expect. So that's another SIG I'm looking forward to join these discussions.
That's
I'm
great.
very pleased
It's
to
great
hear that the CCC is the cool place to be. I know it's not quite what you said, but I'll take it. So all the cool kids are. So
It is.
that's good.
Yes, great to have you here. And I know Canonical's releasing some distributions that have confidential computing baked into them, I think.
Yeah, that's correct.
That might be a great tech talk topic if you're interested in doing that at some point, help bring awareness to that.
Noted.
Great. And I think I recognize everybody else on the list. If I'm mistaken and you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself in the past, just go ahead and interrupt me here. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of flow into old business to keep us on track. At the end of last year, we decided to move away from the formal voting on minutes, save ourselves some time. These are pretty easy to review in the background, and if it turns out there is some substantive error, we can always go back and correct them since it's just a GitHub artifact. So the couple things that I wanted to pull out that were decisions that we made is we had the Coconut SVSM project come through. They made their second presentation. We reviewed the materials and everybody voted to approve them. So they are the most recent project to go on to our onboarding board. And then the typical flow for that is going through some of the legal steps, and then the board will officially acknowledge that all that has been finalized. And I see Jörg is on the call right now. So I think you know who to ping if anything is stalled, but as long as you're here, if there is anything blocking you, feel free to bring that up.
All good for now, thanks.
Great. The other thing that we did was recognizing one of the big friction points in the adoption of confidential computing is getting everything available in the Linux kernel. We have decided to create a SIG, and that's going to be the context behind our tech talk for today. I see Dan Williams is on the call from Intel, so we'll be hearing from Dan in just a minute here. Did anybody have any questions about either of those two items? The third thing that we went to was project mentors. So we're starting to have, as we see this growth in confidential computing, we're seeing a greater influx in projects. And what we started out with was sort of a one-to-one with TAC voting members and projects. And then we kind of recognized there's capability in the community for anybody who's a regular participant in the TAC to fill that role. At the same time, with more projects joining, it's not clear if we can maintain this one-to-one correspondence. So we just need to decide concretely whether that's something that we're going to prioritize, which we can probably do, or whether we move to a more of a subject matter expertise role where each one of the TAC members lists a subject matter area that a project maintainer can go ask them about for support. Maybe Jörg, I will also put you on the spot as one of our more recent projects. When you looked at the things that you were going to get from the CCC, the project mentor thing was something I think you asked about. So I'm curious from your perspective whether that's something that was appealing or just it was another thing in a list that was available.
So it was mostly a thing on the list, but I think it's also helpful to increase the communication with other projects as a CCC and see where there's overlap and where Coconut SVSM can help, where other projects can help us. So I think Alec volunteered to be mentor if I remember correctly in the last meeting. But if there's no mentor, we could also live with that. So, but having one would be helpful, I think.
Great, that's good feedback, and that's right. I think Alec did put his hand up, which was great. I asked people to put their thoughts into the GitHub issue comments, and so we'll just sort of re-up that so that we can round out thinking on what we want to do with this benefit to the projects. And we'll probably try to close out on that with some direction in the next meeting or two. So that was
Does Raluca Ada Pupa from Berkeley attend these meetings?
sometimes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that was what we accomplished as we headed into the end of the year. We also had talked about TAC goals and priorities for 2024, but we're going to come around to that as a new business topic. Meanwhile, sort of the star talk of the day is about the Linux kernel upstream, and maybe I'm not sure exactly what Dan's prepared to talk about today. But maybe one of the motivating cases that led to our interest in creating a SIG, maybe some norms from the kernel community that a lot of us might not be familiar with, to think about how we engage things like that. But instead of imagining what Dan Williams will talk about, I'll turn things over to him now. Dan Williams is a principal engineer at Intel, which is a pretty high bar to clear. He's a longtime kernel maintainer and recently created one of the main architectural changes in the Linux kernel to make attestations available through the kernel in a much more coherent way than what we were tracking towards earlier in 2023. So with that, welcome, Dan.
Hey, thank you so much, other Dan. We're trying to get a peak Dan here, and this can be more of a conversation than a tech talk, just because I think this kernel SIG is a body that doesn't have a backing specification, but or kind of a place to land spec changes. But I'm hoping it's a place where we can highlight issues and make decisions, or at least get them on the table. Like, hey, these are the places where we run into issues. The main, so as Dan mentioned, I'm from the core kernel team at Intel, and one of the main motivations I'm basically responsible for Intel's approach to getting support for device security topics upstream. So adding devices to VMs and making sure that they can participate and send and talk to private memory within a guest. And it turns out that Intel's not the only company doing this. And unlike kind of like base TDX or SEV-SMP or some of these base things that are kind of more architecture specific and kind of can live in architecture specific code, this device security topic really touches on a lot more common cross-architecture core kernel code. And so now we're in a situation where this is really just like a self-defense immune system response that the kernel has when multiple vendors all want to do the same thing. Is we don't want to have every vendor like staying in their own silo, focusing on their own problem, and kind of like we really want to throw everybody in the same pool. Everybody get their act together, because we're all trying to solve the same problem. Because the overriding principle of this is like we want to do what's best for the long-term health of the Linux kernel. Like yes, Intel pays my salary. Yes, I want to see Intel solutions successful, but I also understand that like none of us are going to be successful unless this goes up in a coherent way upstream. And so one of my first kind of introductions to this arena was a new device driver for that Intel is writing to do these attestation reports. Get kind of hey VM, or hey platform, tell me about the health of my VM, and sign it and do it in a way that I can verify. And there was a first mover in this space, and they invented their little device driver and their own little user space ABI, and then Intel's like, oh, we're gonna come along and we're gonna make our Intel version of the same thing. It's gonna be the Intel name. That's gonna do kind of the same stuff, but so it's gonna be over here. And we were on a path to like have a device driver, a user ABI per vendor, and that's usually a red flag. Like, you don't need to have like the take the kernel read system call. You don't need a Intel read and a AMD read and a and an ARM read. Like you want the read system call, and it's kind of the same theme with this attestation report ABI. So we got the community all involved there, but the lessons there were, one was that other parts of the kernel didn't know that this was happening. So it had kind of been happening in a corner of the kernel that people hadn't been paying attention to. So we up leveled that, and that was a good experience because it was the people that got involved were like, hey, I didn't know this was happening, and I'm so happy you're pulling it together because now they don't have to dig into the details on each vendor's technology. They can start from the common stuff and then use that as a guidepost to drill down. So they don't have to start from like, okay, how did this company randomly do their own ABI? They can start from the commons and work their way down, and that lets us have cross kernel conversations. That's the whole point of this, is to have people that are kind of half paying attention but have deep expertise in other parts of the kernel that they can jump into another part of the kernel, make sense of it, have opinions, and help guide the work that's happening at the lower levels. They kind of don't really care about it, but they care about the bigger picture of it. So that was successful because we stopped the Intel specific thing, got the AMD people on board with, hey, we're moving forward, we're going to switch to this. But out of that, it was kind of conversation with people like Dan. It's like, hey, like, is there a way to avoid that kind of thrash in the future? Like, and so Dan's idea, like what if we had a kernel sig? What if we had a place where we could talk about these things? And my reaction to that was like, man, one of the most useful engagements I have with a specification working body is the ACPI EFI code first process. And what that is like, if you look at how often ACPI specifications come out, it's like 18, 24 months. And so if you have a good idea and you want to put it into your operating system or you want to change ACPI, then you put that change in your operating system. If you go through the kind of go have the confidential discussion with this working group, have the reviews in private, and then wait 18 months for your change to come out, that's too slow. And ACPI EFI working group recognized that. So they invented this code first process, and what it is the ACPI confidentiality rules only apply if you bring up the idea in the working group, and then the cast is like, it's kind of like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. It's like what happens in the ACPI working group stays in there. But what the code first process does is says, hey, like, ideas are going to happen especially out in open source Tiano core Linux kernel. What if we have a process where those ideas can be raised in public, and then pointed at the ACPI working group, like, hey, like, Linux has this issue. We want to fix it this way with ACPI change. What do people think? And then the ACPI working group is made aware of that discussion, and they watch it, and they invite people to publicly engage. And then after that kind of conversation settles down, then the ACPI working group can have a private conversation about, yes, we think it's a good idea, and we think it's going to be the next spec, or not. And that allows the ACPI working group to say, yep, this is going to be the next spec, and everybody who was part of the conversation can move ahead. They can implement their code and be kind of assured that it's going to happen. And it really cuts down on that. It really accelerates that feedback loop. So you don't. Yes, in 18 months your spec version will come out, but you can move ahead with confidence. And so my expectation is we're going to run into more situations like this, where it would be really nice if we had some place to say, hey, we're heading towards a situation where we need to make a decision or recommendation. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a body with some kind of standing to make that decision and record it. And that's the idea behind the kernel sig. But the devil's in the details about how we organize this. And so I think it's going to be fluid in the near term. What we do already have is a standing call, like a monthly call with people that are involved in this device security topic. We have representatives from all the usual suspects, and my intention is to is to be like, hey, surprise, you guys are now actually part of the kernel sig, because we're having basically that's a forum where we're already having these discussions of like, you guys don't do that, well, we're gonna think about this. Do you support that aspect? How do you do in yours? Like, hey, maybe we're heading toward a place where maybe we should all agree to change this. And so one concrete example that I wanted to raise here, just to give you a flavor of what might rise to the level of hey, this is a cross company kernel thing that we might need to discuss and make a decision on, is it's something small but important. There's a specification called TDISP, trusted device something, but it's a PCI specification for how you oh, and Dan's bringing up the email thread. It's a PCI specification for how the platform security module talks to the device security module, and and there's a state machine going between those. And one of the device states are unlocked, which is like kind of a typical device. Locked, which is a state where all the device things that are security sensitive are like frozen and won't change anymore. And then there's the run state where the device is actually allowed to DMA to private memory and is fully online. And two of the vendors expose that state transition where the guest can see a locked state and the guest can say yes, no to going to the run state. And a third vendor says like, hey, it doesn't really matter because if we didn't accept the device in the first place, then like we have other ways to protect against like device doing things that we're not supposed to do. So we're just going to jump straight from unlock to run, and we're not going to let the guest see that. And so the feedback there is like, hey, like we're talking to device driver vendors or people that are saying like, no, we really want to have a distinct point in the flow where we know the device is locked, but we need to go do some other verification, and we don't want to go to the run state. One of those kind of scenarios is like, what if you have DMA already running, and the device flips to run state? Like, you kind of just want to have a point where you say, okay, nothing's device is quiesced. We know it's locked, and we know we're not. We can actually control that transition. So this is an example of like, hey, we had two vendors come up and say, hey, yeah, let's allow for that in Linux. So our internal infrastructure, let's allow for that state transition to happen. But how do we communicate that to others? How do we kind of make that this agreed upon decision? In upstream terms, like it's without a SIG, it would be we go back and forth on the mailing list, and maybe somebody notices that we had this discussion back this December last year, but there's no kind of common clearinghouse where like, hey, this was an issue that was raised, and is it put to bed or not? So at a minimum, I think that's what the kernel sig can do, is just be a place like, hey, if you want to get a listing of all the open debates, go here, and we can have a get issues list for those kind of things. But otherwise, yeah, this is kind of a body that's similar to, so like the Linux Foundation has the technical advisory board. I'm the chair of that advisory board, but we always tell people we don't have any real power. we do bring the collective influence of the people that are members of that body, and that's so that is influence that we can wield, and I feel like this kernel SIG is going to be of the same caliber of the people that show up that have influence within their organizations are going to reflect those decisions back in the organizations, but certainly someone can cynically just ignore us and do their own thing. But I've seen the influence model work, and I think also the fact that I think transparency helps the conversation, because I think there's also been scenarios like, hey, like Linux wants this and it's going to make things easier for other people. Like, don't other operating systems, wouldn't they agree with this? So like I would also have hopes that we could attract not just Linux kernel developers, but Windows kernel developers, VMware kernel developers, to say like, let's give these vendor implementations feedback that says, you know what, like you're going to make every single operating system kernel developer on the planet happy if you make this change. Like I think that's feedback that like I would want to hear. So I'm hoping that's the carrot, and that we don't need too much sticks and process and formality. But we'll see how it goes. So we'll start with kind of informally, start recording things, drafting people that are already. The best time to get people to pay attention to upstream is when their code is not upstream, because like once their code's upstream, they suddenly lose interest in talking to you. But like once they have to convince you to let their code go upstream, they seem to want to talk to you. So that's always been the Linux kernel motivator. Like yeah, until we stop arguing, the code's not going anywhere. And so if you don't want me to argue with you, let's influence things. So that was kind of a rambling stream of consciousness of the things that kind of things we want to do, what this is about. I'm open to feedback of how we can make this successful or make it useful. I've watched how ACPI operates, and that seems to be make a proposal, have a meeting. If the meeting has quorum, say, anybody have a problem with this proposal? And as long as nobody says they will need more time to look at it, it usually goes through. So there's no kind of formal vote recording and that kind of thing. That feels like a way forward, just to say like, hey, yep, enough people kind of showed up and nobody had a real problem with it, so we're going to just record this. And we also have the fallback that like, yeah, we're not actually a specification working body, so this is all kind of everybody on their best behavior kind of thing. But that's the idea of what this is about.
That's great. Broad characterization of all the things that went into this here. I'll just point out like a couple other things for context for people who aren't normally involved in kernel work, which is, at least I'll just speak for me. When I read through the kernel threads, they're pretty dense, but they're also very specific. So, for each proposed point on here, if you walk through this thread, you're going to see somebody put some thought into giving some very specific feedback. But we're all at a very like detailed, dense viewpoint. There's not a single picture in here that you could go to and gesture at together. And so by being able to get on a call live and gesture at the same thing, I think we can get to common understandings a little bit faster. Now, I know that we've got most of the major distros on the call right now. So we've got SUSE and Canonical and Red Hat, and we also have different hardware companies represented, which is the whole point of this. So I'm interested in getting feedback about getting this SIG underway. I don't care too much about going through like the specifics that we wrote up, because this was kind of just to get the thoughts out there and share this with the kernel community. I just wanted to point out one thing, which is like when Dan was talking about like voting, and we don't really want to make this a place where people come to argue as much as that they come to collaborate. So we specifically pushed off any sort of formal decision making there. within how we've initially structured this. But kind of like we talked about with Sal's role starting off, everything's open to change as we get some experience under us. Same thing with the SIG. So Mike Purcell, our executive director, got his hand up first. So we'll start with him and then others who have opinions here. Love to hear from you.
Thank you. I mean, firstly, I'm very, very pleased that this is happening. And Dan, thank you very much indeed for the intro. I'm horrified knowing a few kernel engineers about the suggestion of mixing kernel engineers in Las Vegas. But yeah, okay, let's not go there. I think a couple of points. Firstly, this is really important for at least 3 distinct communities. One is people in the CCC who are looking to collaborate on this stuff. The second is the kernel community, and the third is the security community generally, who will benefit from the transparency here. People in the CCC get a chance to collaborate in an open antitrust way, which is all good and safe, which is fantastic. Which kind of leads me to my final point, which is that we need to be very careful. Actually, not quite a final point. We need to be very careful that we do. There's lots of visibility and transparency and documentation and recording of what goes on here. I think we're pretty good at that. The last thing I would say is just a note of caution for people who are thinking of getting involved with this and don't have a kernel background. The way that the kernel operates and the way people talk in kernel discussions is very specific, and it's not always conducive to people who are, I see Dan smiling very broadly, to people who are coming to it cold. That doesn't mean that it's an unfriendly place. It can seem that way, but it's not necessarily a place where it makes sense just to come and ask straight questions to the entire group, for instance. So I'm not sure if Dan, you want to reflect on that, but that doesn't mean people shouldn't get involved, but
Right.
Just be careful about how you do it.
Yeah, I'll tell a quick anecdote. Like there was the best plumber session ever. It was in Portugal, I believe, and they invited a researcher. She did a research paper. She did sentiment analysis of email threads, and she did an exercise with the audience of like, hey audience, like is this email mean or not mean, and just kind of looking at like basically is a kernel an unfriendly place. And so she polled the audience, and then she, at the end she showed the polls of like, is this email mean or not? And then we had a discussion about it with the audience, and so it was some older dinosaurs like they've been around for a while, like myself have been around for a while, Greg KH in the audience, but also new contributors, and invariably we look at the thing and some people said, yeah, that's definitely mean, and other people said that's definitely not, and then we like kind of figured out who said what, and all the older people were like, oh no, that's totally like, so yeah, we can't tell if it was just like collective abuse over many years where we're just hardened to it. But yeah, I mean it's very direct, it's very terse, and to the point. I would say that like if you participate, if you have a bad time, reach out to me, and like there's people in the community that can help you navigate. I think we have a Discord for this other device security topic. Like I've seen people say things there that are good for the list, but they wouldn't say on the list because reasons. So that might also be another use case for this kernel SIG, is just to have other modes of engaging that aren't on the mailing list, recorded in perpetuity. Like, so yeah, it was interesting you said like we should make sure we have recordings of everything. I don't know what that looks like for things that are off the list. Like certainly everything that goes on the list is searchable by lore.
For the meetings, I think, is the way we tend to do this.
Yeah.
We should also be aware that the CCC does have a code of conduct, which this SIG will be subject to. So we need to make sure that people are aware of that.
Yep, and the kernel has a code of conduct. It's a contributors covenant.
I don't know if the same one. 2.0. Yeah, we said the same. Then that's good.
Yeah. So we have a code of conduct. We have a code of conduct committee. I'm very interested in I'm very interested in everybody's like because like to me, like when I came to Linux, it was this eye-opening. Like, wait, anybody who can type an email can be a kernel contributor. Like, it doesn't matter who you are, your background. Like, I don't care. Like, it's like that. It's like the bathroom side. Like, I don't care. Just wash your hands. It's like, I don't care. Just send me the patch. Like, I don't like your background doesn't matter. And that was really inspiring to me. In coming to kernel community. So that's the peak of open source for me. Is it doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter how you communicate. Send me the good patch, and we'll merge it. So there's people in the community that are interested in having those conversations. And if you're new to it and lost, like, reach out. There's people that can help.
Yeah, and as CCC people, our first step isn't to go direct people to LKML. I think really the topic of this conversation and this SIG is, hey, we're gonna start having like regular human conversations. So I'm not quite as concerned of the situation of like two styles of communication colliding here. One of the things that we need to do is just get started with a topic, and sort of like putting the first patch on the mail list. You know, it's not going to be right, but you want to put some effort in to make sure that it's as right as possible. And so in the same vein, we want to get started with a topic with the SIG that's going to help us figure out how to make this an effective mechanism for everybody. And the topic that other Dan led off with was this TDISC one. And I know we've got Samuel Ortiz on the call, who's very actively involved in this and a thought leader in the space. And I wonder, Samuel, your thoughts on using this as a pipe cleaning exercise, to borrow a term, for the kernel SIG.
Yeah, we can initiate. I mean, it's the whole TD's discussion is really, I mean, it to some extent is gonna define how we do device attestation and trusted IO on Linux. So it's a very suitable topic for this kernel SIG kickoff, definitely. So we can start discussing this, and I think interestingly, as Dan was saying, that there are some discussion on specific points of the assignment flows, but on the positive side of things, it seems that the community around the discussion, by community I mean mostly hardware vendors, seem to agree on most of the flows. So we could start by describing what's the current status quo is, where people agree and where people disagree, and maybe collaborate and understand if we check if we can converge on the remaining point. I don't know, Dan, if the two Dans, that makes sense or not.
Like I'll give you my Dan opinion. The other Dan can fill in his as well. But I think in the near term, it's we need to get to this RFC of the basically of the common piece of the user ABI, because then people will have a skeleton to put the meat onto. Because right now we're kind of like, imagine a world where we have some infrastructure already landed, and I feel like we need to get that established first, and then we can say, oh, hey, like, you want to extend this part of it in this way, and that's more, because right now it's like, we have the entire thing in front of us, and it's a bit messy. I do know that Alexi has a he has a branch, and I saw him rev it at the end of December, so I'm watching that, and so I think so AMD seems to be ready to put something out there. Intel is kind of right there as well, and so I think that's the first step. We do have the plumbers video, and where we had this call, and we basically agreed to the principles of, like, well, it's the standard kernel enabling principles of be ruthlessly simple, but no simpler, like as simple as possible, but no simpler, and I want to get to that, and I feel like the starting point here is get to a point where we can get devices into trusted devices into a VM, and then make it more sophisticated where they can bounce out, they can error out. We can bring them in at runtime versus doing it ahead of time, but like have the kind of roadmap of like, so people are going to be like, hey, no, like, you're not addressing my use case. Like, oh yeah, no, we're going to get to it, but like we first have to get something basic done first, and then we can make it more sophisticated. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but like I think we at least have kind of those principles that we talked about at Plumbers.
And I'll sort of pivot on that to one of the main motivations here is that I can quickly highlight it here. Sort of like this area of the background, that the one of the things that we didn't talk about was in as much detail was like one of the motivating cases here. I think maybe Dan did touch on it, that in order to get an attestation, there were these different vendor specific drivers that were going on, and that was part of the problem was that the people who focus on the kernel are on LKML already, and that a lot of times, at least in confidential computing, people who work on security technologies aren't necessarily in that same space. So we had these two groups working sort of independently. And the goal of the SIG is to bring these together. Right now, Dan Williams has a community going on TDISP along with Samuel. And so that's probably the starting point for how we get this interaction going. But that's going to be very heavily weighted towards people who are already on this mail list and already know how to engage over the mail list. So my ask to the CCC members here, again, across, I would assume the hardware vendors and the disties that I see on the list, is you might not be connected to this work. Other people, your company might or might not be. We want to do this work of bringing the security specialists, the confidential computing specialists in with the kernel specialists, the driver specialists. So we'll be sending out a communication to bootstrap this first meeting. The goal isn't to like stuff it with everybody who's just going to be there lurking, but it is to get people who are probably working on topics like AI acceleration to take a look at, this is the start of how devices get brought into your confidential computing boundary. Are there assumptions being made here that are really different than the assumptions that you're making? And then I think we can advance that better.
I would also, I would add to that. Yeah, I agree with that. And like to me, if you want to, like, we're going to be talking about a lot of like low-level device stuff that I think most people don't care about. But when it rises to that level of, okay, this is the ABI to security software, read Diana Glaze's responses in some of these threads. Like she's like, to me like she's that security expert that's trying to grok what the heck are these kernel guys saying. And so like she's taught me a lot about how this stuff is supposed to work in security context. Like I'm a device dev person. I'm not a security person, which should make you feel comfortable that somebody who's not a security person is writing fundamental security stuff. But in terms of like, hey, this thread's making no sense to me. If Diana is in the thread, or Diona, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but if she's in the thread, read her responses, because she's she's engaging at that level of trying to make it, how do I integrate this into a cloud deployment kind of situation.
Yeah, that's a great example. So for logistics, we'll do a post probably to both the TAC mail list and the Cocoa, the Linux Cocoa list. So we'll have to get those particulars put into the mail, but the ask to those of you in the CCC community is to bring those notices to the relevant people in your companies. And I don't know if SUSE, Canonical, Red Hat, others have any other reflections on that?
I may say that this is a great initiative, and exactly like you guys said, even if we're not looking into working on the actual device drivers, the ABIs and the approaches, and hopefully the blessed shared approaches and not one per each technology is really, really valuable. And my question is whether you'll also send a publication about the group in the CCC mailing group, so that we'll catch that.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the TAC list, the CCC TAC list.
Okay, yeah.
We do have, like, I don't know, half a dozen different mailing lists with the
Yeah.
CCC. So if anybody's got a better suggestion, I don't mind doing a certain amount of spamming.
There is
Well,
the communities page that if it's being added to that page that was shared earlier today by Sal, that could also be a place that we could monitor, and once it's there, we'll just join.
Yeah, let me grab that.
And Dan, I'd also say that this should definitely go out to the attestation SIG mailing list, just in case there's anyone who's on that and not the TAC list, and to the general list, actually, again, because we want people to be made aware. That'd be my view.
Yeah, indeed, quite a bit of this overlaps with attestation. I remember Thomas commenting on the initial thread that maybe this should actually just be like a sub part of the attestation SIG. And then Ophir, is this what you were talking about, making sure we get it listed
Yeah,
here?
exactly. If it is added here, we can just follow it and join it once it's here.
Yep, that's a great reminder for us to make sure it gets listed here. So we've got the other SIGs on here, and eventually got to links so that people could find these things. So we'll do that a little bit faster with this SIG. Okay, I think we're one. Go ahead.
I will take that as an action item. I'll discuss with you during the week so we can get all the right information out there and sort that out.
Thanks, Ryan. Okay, and I think we're about out of time for this. Time maybe for any one last comment. All right, well, Dan Williams, thanks for your partnership on this. Samuel, thanks also for the TDISP work and letting us or helping facilitate getting the SIG ramped with that concept.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for the time. And yeah, let's get this straightened out.
Great. Okay. On to new business. This is a terrible time of day for our Asia-based colleagues. And so Mike did a tour last year with a few conferences, and I think heard a lot of feedback about this. So we want to try to make sure that we are as accessible as possible across the globe. In every community that I'm in, this is a challenge. It seems like the sun is not up on the same part of the world at the same time. We have thought about just flattening out the Earth. Some people think that maybe we already have a flat Earth, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So Mike may have some better ideas here. So I'll turn it over to Mike for this.
Thank you. So, I mean, my view generally is that if everyone operated on GMT, we'd be fine. It works, and I know people from the States complain about it, but it works for the US Submarine Corps. I don't see why everyone else in the States shouldn't do it as well. But I know that we're not going to make that happen. So, as I said, well, as Dan said, this does come up quite a lot, and people really do care about it. So we have a number of options, I think. And this isn't just a TAC problem; it's a GB problem and also a problem for outreach. So we do need to work out what to do about this. So I'm just trying to find an email I sent earlier today. If you happen to have that, Dan, to hand, or Ben or Rian does, it might be good to just share it. I'm just looking for it now. What was it called? Here we go. I found it. So let me just share my screen. I'll just read it out.
Yeah. No, that's right.
I think we have a number of choices to be made. So firstly, we could decide to change all the meetings, or we could, for the TAC and say all meetings for the TAC are at this time. And I don't think that's going to work. I don't think we're going to find a time that fits everybody, because we have three main cohorts. We have European and those sorts of time zones, in which I count Rian because he's actually in South Africa. We have Asia Pac folks, and we have US folks. Finding something that meets those is not going to work. So I think we're going to have to do some alternating. So that's the very first thing.
Is this the right
then I think,
one?
sorry, my screen's doing really weird things. Nope, there's a new one that I sent, quite a long one, this morning.
Oh, okay.
Your time.
Oh, this morning. Okay.
It's called Asia Pac friendly meeting times. I think we're on the left. I think you're on the. I sent it to you.
Oh, okay. It's not necessarily
not the group. Sorry, no, it's not into
okay.
the full list. Sorry, because I sent it to the heads of the committees as well. If you want to share that, that's fine. But I'm reading through it at the moment. So there are three types of possible times. There's US friendly, which is good for the US, okay for Europe, terrible for Asia. So that's kind of early PST, which is now, basically. There's Europe friendly, which is early GMT, afternoon Asia, which is good for Europe, okay for Asia, and terrible for the US. And there's Asia friendly, which is early Asia, afternoon US, which is good for Asia, okay for US, and terrible for Europe. And so, I don't. That's the problem. We're never going to find one that fits all. And I think we're going to need to choose maybe two of those, or maybe three, but two of those, and maybe bounce between them. And I think three becomes more complex, so I'd suggest two. The other thing that we can do, and I think it makes sense to consider this, is to run multiple meetings with the same agenda in the slides. And the second version of that meeting includes summaries of the previous instance of the meeting. It's not perfect, but it allows us at least to have that. And we should also remember that pretty much all of these meetings are recorded, so there's nothing to stop people listening, but that's not the same as participating. I think also we should generally be increasing notice of agendas, so people know what's coming up, so they can make a decision to get up early or stay up late if needs be. We should promote and simplify access to recordings, and also probably consider a brief summary of the previous minutes and new agendas and slide decks, just a slide or two. And we kind of do that for previous actions, but what did we talk about? What were the tech talks? Just what happened last time on a single slide or two slides, and I think that'd be good. There's one final thing, which is and I'm not sure how much I care about this, but it's just worth noting, which is that the three people most likely to be attending most meetings are actually in Europe or European time zones, because it's me, Sal, and Rian, who's in South Africa. That means that we're in a position, because we're staff members, to attend most of these. That doesn't mean that we should be picking times that are good for us all the time. I really don't think that, but it's just worth bearing in mind if we're looking at communicating between different versions, different instances of the same meeting. So my preference would be to alternate between this time of meeting and an earlier time of meeting. But again, that's me. So those would be a Europe friendly, a US friendly, and a Europe friendly meeting, or an Asia friendly meeting, I should say. Sorry. Yeah, well, so those would be ones I could get to, but that's obviously part of the reason that I would prefer those. So this is something we have to discuss in this group, but also across the groups, and I'll be bringing it to the GB. But yeah, that's kind of it. I'll open it up for discussion and for your thoughts first, I guess, Dan.
Yeah, I agree. 2 is better than 3. 2 is better than 1. 2 seems to be a good sweet spot. So doing 2 different time zones. I've seen people try to do the same meeting twice in a former community, and that wasn't super effective. I think we can partly accommodate that by just having the recordings that we do, and then people get to participate live in some conversations, and then they'll prioritize which ones those are. I would love to get to a specific time proposal so that people can react to that specifically, but just open it up to the world audience that we have here to react to the what Mike has said.
Particularly people who've had this problem in other communities, and I'd love to hear how you fix it or failed to fix it. Also useful to know, right?
I'll offer just 2 things. So there are specifically 2 times globally that always work best. So for GMT, it's going to be 9 a.m. for APAC, and 3 p.m. GMT is the optimal time in a day to hit the global market. And I think secondarily to that, the only thing that really becomes important here, if we're going to stagger the meetings and the times in order to make sure the agendas can continue to move forward, especially with voting, we have to make sure that we have clear designations for attendees and make sure that they're present, because this could stopgap you for weeks potentially if we can't get the votes in. So we need to make sure that they're present.
Yeah, we are able to do votes via email for certain things, but it doesn't always work for everything. It's difficult to get consensus. We should be clear as well.
And Sal, you were suggesting it was 3 p.m. GMT maps to morning-ish APAC?
Yeah, so 9 a.m. GMT is APAC, and then 3 p.m. GMT is my American region optimal times. That's why they're really challenging to get, because most people have meetings at those times.
So the 3 p.m. is what we're at the moment. And we should say that, and they track with daylight and summertime and stuff, all those sorts of things as well. But
okay, so 9 a.m. GMT would be the one to add.
That which is horrible for you guys, right? Horrible for West Coast, pretty horrible for East Coast, frankly. What's 9 a.m. GMT? That's -8. So it's 1 a.m. For PST, and 5 a.m. 3 a.m. for for Eastern.
Okay.
So one question. I can't remember, who is the vice chair of this committee?
We never specified a vice chair, which is
okay.
something that I kind of want to talk about. We may as well sort of blend it in live. One thought that I had was that I'd like to rotate through the voting members of the TAC, so that we've got more sort of succession, a broader succession basis.
One thing I was thinking about combining that is to make sure that whoever we do have as a deputy or rotating deputy is someone who will be in the time zone of the meeting or other meetings. Not sure it necessarily is good enough reason, but it's certainly worth thinking about.
Yep. Vinny commented in chat. 5 to 10 p.m. Pacific time works well with Asia. So to, I guess, maybe to connect us with the last conversation.
Sorry, can I just add one thing to that? I agree. I did have one set of people from China saying that they tend to be staying up late anyway, and if they have meetings at that time, that means staying up late and then getting up early in the morning, which they didn't like. But I'm not sure that was always helpful, always the case. But I have heard it from one set of folks. That's all.
Okay. Okay.
There is no winning.
No, there's no way that you can have the sun shining on both sides of the globe again. So it is what it is, and we want to make sure that we do our best to be as global as possible. So, Mike, I'll read what you sent after this, and then presumably the best course forward is if you want to just make a proposal to the TAC mail list to add this time, then we can have people react to that very specifically and recruit a co-chair if it's at a time.
Well, there's another question, which is, do we do this for every other meeting? Do we do it for one of 3, one of 4? And that's an important question to raise. And I, again, love some feedback in live now if people have any thoughts of
that. Can I suggest that once you have some suggestions, as suggested, you will send a survey? Now, just to be honest, you know, it can be that the majority will vote. I'm trying to talk while I'm thinking about it. If it's a voting, then the majority can affect.
We don't need to go by the majority, but understanding how people have voted is also helpful.
Yeah, so a survey, I think, with some suggestions would be the best thing to.
Okay, I think that's something that Sal and I can put together with Rian and Ben. We will work on that. Fine, I'll take that as an action. Thank you.
So my preference for frequency would be probably more like on the 1 in every 4 side of things, with the idea that we have a good core group now and we can grow into Asia on a gradual basis. And if we switch very abruptly to every other, then we'll probably, I'm afraid we're going to lose some momentum.
I agree, but I absolutely agree. I just wanted to raise it as a question. I think that's the right way to do it. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your time. It's not an easy one, but we really need to do this. So thank you.
Great. Okay, I'm just going to introduce TAC responsibilities for 2024 and try to do that in like 5 minutes so that we can get to Mark and Sal for the RFI stuff, because those are very time sensitive. And so we've got, oh, hey, Catalin, nice to see you. So for the bulk of what we do as an advisory council, we're going to structure that around objectives and key results, just like we did for 2023. So this is a reason of why something is important to us and the things that we think will actually move the needle to affect that change. And we've got a working doc going, and like last year, these are going to nest up in a way that we can communicate to the board pretty clearly. What have we done for our projects? Do we, how do we make them more mature? How do we get more projects that fill out a bigger part of the ecosystem? And then going into the ecosystem, are people aware of confidential computing? Are we part of compliance docs? Are we engaged in academic settings? And then finally, community. Are we growing a healthy community as we continue to grow as an organization? Are we making sure that we are reaching all possible contributors and making ourselves as strong as we can? So that's the bulk of our work. I also want to make sure that each TAC member finds ways to be engaged on an individual basis. Mike just mentioned the co-chair thing. I'd love to see each TAC member partner up with me for at least one TAC meeting, so you kind of see the flow of what goes into putting an agenda together, which is not just typing things in bullets, but how do we build it up what it is we're going to work on. And I've got a whole bunch of other thoughts about that, but for sake of time, I'm just going to pause here for any quick reactions to TAC responsibilities for 2024, and then we'll head over into the RFI work. Okay.
I'm going to add one thing very, very briefly then, which is that I think that we have a responsibility to engage, and I don't know how we put that in, but we need more people to be engaging throughout what we're doing, getting engaged in the projects, speaking at conferences, working with their colleagues across their organizations. The CCC only works when we do stuff together. So lots of the people on this call are actually very engaged. Please encourage your colleagues to be engaged as well. Thank you. Sorry, Dan.
Couldn't have said it
better about as well. Yeah,
absolutely, completely. Probably my focus for the year. So yeah, next session maybe we'll build these out, or I'll reach out to TAC voting members one-on-one. Okay. One of those big areas that we want to continue to have impact in is making sure that when companies think about securing what they're doing, they are aware of confidential computing and how to use that appropriately. A vein of that is how is confidential computing represented in various standards and government documents. Mark identified a couple opportunities here. Manu also posted something in the list. These are all due in very short order, including this NIST document 1800-28 is due in like a few days. So I'll hand it over to Mark and Sal here.
Okay, thank you. So I started noticing that NIST publishes things and then gives the community some time to engage and started monitoring them. So these are the next two. There is no like forewarning of publication, so I end up checking them every couple of weeks or so. They typically give about a month after publication.
I was going to ask you, because this was like one of the big blind spots for us, is how do we find out about these things? Because we usually find out about them late.
You poll.
And it verifies from Twitter sometimes. Swear.
That's X.
Hate it. But that's where I found out they like delayed a vast RFI that I wanted to do. So, but these aren't delayed yet.
Yeah. So anyway, so these publications, there are actually two kinds from NIST. There are special publications and then there are internal reports. I'm not exactly sure what the difference between them are. But there is one that is coming up, and the deadline is this upcoming January, which also happens to be MLK Day. So I know it's part of the long weekend. Now I go through them, and I was looking because NIST is a standards organization, and I was looking from the sort of compliance and risk perspective, which is the sort of bread and butter of the GRC SIG. But as I was going through them, I realized, this is sort of a job for the broader consortium to engage and perhaps help engage with NIST on trying to see where data and use protection may also be useful. So specifically for the 828, it's comprised of three parts. There is part A, which is kind of a executive level abstract. There isn't a lot of meat there. Then there is a B, which is more of a generic part and talks about different ways in which applications can be attacked and how data and use sort of the different security technologies can help. They do not mention data and use protection at all. And then there is part C that explains how through a combination of products that are already in the marketplace, that, very specific products in that case, how some of these protections can be put in place. So there is a document already out, and Sal, I will just share links with you so you can communicate them more broadly, because right now they sit in the GRC Google Drive folder. But it's really hard to comment on section C, because it's existing products and what they do, and they don't use confidential computing. But some part A contains some inaccuracies that are already mentioned in the response document, and part B, again, being more generic, could use some additional verbiage which is being suggested in the response. And the response, I think, has to be submitted by email, so perhaps Sal and I can coordinate who sends this on behalf of the consortium. But I would like folks to take a closer look. Similarly, 10 days since special publication 800-226, it's actually, there is only a couple of pages in that entire document where confidential computing could be mentioned. So that's pretty much a small lift there, because it talks specifically about differential privacy. But it actually doesn't, it mentions confidential computing, data use protection, but it kind of mentions it in a negative light, I thought, and perhaps a correction is warranted. But again, this is what these comment periods are for. All right, so that's really it. I will keep looking for what NIST does. So for GRC, I'm the contact person for NIST, trying to engage with them, and this is why I started paying attention. But if you're aware of other organizations that involve standards, please engage with them as well. Now, unrelated to RFIs, I do want to make another sort of announcement to the TAC. So last year, the GRC SIG has engaged with Cloud Security Alliance, and we have a joint working group. And we primarily focused again on GRC business, and we looked at the cloud controls matrix. And towards January 4th was the deadline which we met for commenting on implementation guidelines around CCM v4. We made an extensive number of proposals for them to incorporate data use protection across CCM. But as we look forward to 24, we don't think we need to form a separate working group with CSA. And instead, we would like to offer folks to engage with us, with CSA in the next year, hoping to, again, as CSA is a mouthpiece that talks to the industry and is in fact quite prominent as far as, with information security officers, et cetera, listen to how we can make confidential computing more prominent for cloud adopters, cloud providers, et cetera. So again, you can reach out to me for details and I can share with you. We have a bi-weekly meeting on Tuesday. Next one is next Tuesday. And it's, fairly open agenda. And again, there is now plenty of bandwidth for us to engage with CSA, and we welcome you guys to join. That's it for me.
That's great. Okay. So as far as taking action on the three things that are listed here, what's the plan for that?
So on the two NIST publications, there are response documents being prepared. And I will share the links to the responses and where the documents reside with Sal. Sal, while this meeting was going on, we connected on LinkedIn. So, I will imminently send out those links. So, please contribute to the responses, and then we'll take care of communicating those responses to NIST by the deadline.
Yeah, and I also would say anytime tomorrow specifically to review the one that's due on the 15th. I mean, exactly as it was explained, it's kind of so off the mark that our use cases aren't even represented. It's worth putting those in. And then any you brought from that, I think fits really well also into the February 2nd RFI when we review that. So, but it's good stuff, and there's more RFIs coming in. So,
okay, so I think there's sort of a risk balance here that I would rather we respond a little bit. I'm trying to find the right word here. I don't want to I don't want to constrain the response by requiring that we go through a heavy approval process, which typically takes weeks for us. I'd rather that we respond than not respond. At the same time, if something goes into a RFI response under the confidential computing name, in theory, that should really represent a consortium viewpoint. So the best way to balance those two is if you can use language that we have produced in other responses or comes from one of our white papers, because then nobody can really, we avoid accidentally saying something that's inaccurate. But again, I'm willing to take some risk to make sure that we get into a document here without making sure we got 30 people.
I think we can add to that. If Sal and I try and take responsibility to moderate and check that what's going in is stuff that we're happy with, Dan, if you have the time as well, obviously great. But we can try and do that. We are, we're staff of the CCC, and we can try and represent that as best we can. We always try and represent the members' interests as well as we can. We could do that specifically for this TAC.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I think that also mitigates the risk.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I think we're doing pretty well on the agenda then. We've gotten through most of what I wanted to do, so we're just coming up then on what we want to do in the next session. What we tracked last year, flowed into a couple slides here, and typically we've got a project-related topic, a TAC objective, one of the OKRs that we're trying to do, and then a tech talk. I don't think we have a pipeline of tech talks. So I think it was it Ijlal from Canonical, and we're sort of just spitballing at the opening about the distributions that you have that have confidential computing in them.
I can certainly talk about that. The next session would be on which date?
It's every 2 weeks, so I think it's the 25th is our next one.
Yeah, so I might have to defer to the next one because we're on sprints for the next 2 weeks.
Great. So it would be great to. This is from last session. So yeah, whenever we can get you in.
Should I send an email to you for signups, or is there somewhere where we can put our names?
Yes, you can send it to me directly, or we've got the Slack. So if somebody could drop the link to join in Slack, that's a good place for it. Okay, perfect. And if you want, the mail list is active too. So any of those places will eventually find their way down to the agenda.
Thank you.
Thank you. So requests to the rest of the participants, if you've got something exciting to talk about with a technical topic, my guidance is always, if it seems like it's not exciting to you because you're working on it every day, it's still going to be new to almost everybody else in the world. So feel free to bring that forward, and I encourage you to. We'll go over TAC responsibilities probably next session. And I don't have the dashboard for when projects are due for their annual review. I don't remember if we left that in here. Is this the old one? think we lost Ben, right? Ben has a conflicting meeting second half, and he had updated this. Yash?
We'll also ask Nate to talk about the CNCF mentoring program and how CCC projects can contribute for 2024 or join the projects.
Great. And that was for like a tech talk or for just a like TAC responsibilities maybe?
I think, yeah, TAC responsibilities / other business.
Okay. So I'm looking for January reviews. I think this slide is out of date, but probably Keystone is coming up. So we'll ask Keystone to come in. Oops. It's not just mentoring, it is internships, right?
Yeah.
Thanks. And this might be a surprise to Keystone, but hopefully we can get their attention. So who was mentoring Keystone? Lily. Oh, right. Yeah, so Lily and Dale would usually communicate. So Yash, I don't know if you can ping Lily on that.
Sure, I'll pick her.
Thanks. Right, any other topics for next session?
Just one thing, I'm not sure it's necessarily for next session, but generally, which is that if you're a company who has currently non-open source code and you're considering open sourcing it, A, well done for thinking of it, B, consider the CCC, but also if it's something that's complex and you're not sure about it, we have experts here on the call and within the CCC who are very happy to talk about what that means, you know, and the steps you go through it and all those sorts of things. So, you know, those are conversations we're always very, very happy to have. There are sort of more sort of commercial engagements about going through that if you really want to do that. But if you want to have a conversation and understand what it looks like, you know, we're going to be up to 10, maybe 12 soon, which is great, but we'd love to have more. And yeah, so if your company is considering doing some open sourcing work, and lots of companies who live and breathe open source already in this consortium, so I don't need to tell them, but please think about it and get in touch, and you'll certainly have a friendly ear, I can promise you.
Well said, Mike. Okay, so if other ideas occur to people as the week goes on, feel free to hit the TAC mail list or send me a note directly, and we will get them on the agenda. And I think that brings us to a close today. One last call for any late agenda items. Going once, going twice. All right, thanks for everybody's attention today. You get 30 minutes back, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, cheers.
Thank you. Bye.